This is the beginning of Media 2. The time is 10:50 a.m. for Back on the Record.
Okay. All right. And so, Officer Sergeant Ponder, you indicated that there is training, but it's not mandatory as it relates to how to enter a person into the database, correct?
Correct.
And is there any type of training that's mandatory as it relates to the gang tracker entry?
No, there's not.
Okay. And if an individual is determined, or I'm sorry, suspected of being a gang member, is there any type of check system in place that the officer needs to make sure that they follow? For example, call into the unit and say, hey, I think I might have a person that's a possible gang member. Is there any type of...
So the checks and balances we have, basically, the officer does a gang card. He submits it. It gets in the database. Then it will go. Then it will go to the gang sergeant at that station.
Mm-hmm.
He'll look at it, review it. If he's okay with it, he'll click a button. Then it'll go to the gang division itself. It'll go to my unit, and specifically Chad Ellis.
Okay.
He will look at the card to see if it fits state law. If it fits state law, the criteria are correct, he'll get accepted, then the individual is on the database for everybody to see. If, for whatever reason, it doesn't fit state law, Chad will highlight in red what needs to be fixed. He'll move it back to the open category and send the officer an email so the officer can open it back up and make the corrections.
Okay. And so there are times where the gang card is rejected, is that right?
Yes, we send it back to the officer often, yes.
Okay. And how would an officer correct a gang card entry being improper?
Well, like I said, so like say one of the criteria was you frequent a documented gang area and you associate with no gang members. So the officer may just put he was hanging out at such and such. Well, you need to also add who he was hanging out with, who he associates with, you know, in that officer. And especially if it's a young officer, maybe the officer is not familiar with the whole gang card process, he'll get it back and realize, well, oh man, I really didn't ask the right questions on the scene. I really don't have the criteria. And that guy will typically just not get in the database. And the officer learned from there, then maybe in the next time he'll do it properly.
Okay.
And ask the right questions on the scene and stuff. That's typically what happens.
Okay. So you guys don't take an officer's, when I say you guys, I mean the City of Houston doesn't take an officer's gang card as you receive it. Sometimes you have them corrected so that you can receive it and enter into the database. Is that correct?
Objection, that misstates the officer's testimony, sergeant's testimony.
Okay.
Please
So
rephrase.
are you going to be doing the deposition? Because you and Mr. Butts both can't.
Well, Mr. Butts hasn't objected to anything yet.
Well, no, but he did make some statements before we got started when you were not here. So I just want to be clear.
I'm not sure.
You can go ahead.
Have you objected to anything?
I haven't objected to anything.
Right, but he
So
did.
He hasn't objected to anything
He
yet.
appeared.
I am an attorney.
Just can I be clear without fussing? Can
Yeah.
I be clear? Are you going to be the one doing the objecting from now on?
If I'm here, I will object.
Okay, and not Mr. Butts.
Right.
Okay, that's all I'm asking. It's not a fight. Okay, thank you. You can go. I mean, you can go ahead and
Well,
respond to the question.
I objected and asked you to rephrase the question.
I'm not going to do that. You can go ahead and answer the question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you repeat the question for us, please?
So you guys don't take an officer's, when I say you guys, I mean the City of Houston doesn't take an officer's gang card as you receive it. Sometimes you have them corrected so that you can receive it and enter it into the database. Is that correct?
Okay, so if it doesn't fit state law, we ask them to correct it.
Okay. So, are these individuals that receive it, are they able to just unilaterally say that this does not meet the criteria, so we're not going to accept it? Or let you answer that first.
I wasn't exactly sure what you asked, but the main officer, and at that time, well, you know what, for that area of town, it was Chad. Chad Ellis is the officer who's in charge of reviewing the cards to make sure they fit state law.
Okay.
And then if they don't fit state law, then he'll send it back to the officer to correct it. And if that officer if he doesn't have the proper, what he needs to fit state law, then that card doesn't get in the system.
Okay, so my question is, if for example, Mr. Ellis receives this card and it doesn't meet state law, does he have the authority to say, I'm not going to send this back, it doesn't meet state law, I'm just going to go ahead and reject this entry, I'm not going to complete this entry?
We don't do that. No, we ask the officer, it's not his work, so we send it back to the officer. And if the officer who did the original card, if he determines now that he doesn't want that guy in the system, then he just won't correct the card, and the card will never be put in. But Chad, we will never get rid of it on our own. It's not our work. It's the officer's work. It's his work, so therefore we'll give it back to the officer himself, and he'll make the determination.
Okay, so there's no procedure in place to reject these gang cards unilaterally without giving them the opportunity to, when I say them, giving the officer that submitted the opportunity to correct it, is that right?
Objection, it's been asked and answered. I think he's gone over the procedure.
Okay,
now.
we have your objection, sir. Thank you. You can answer.
There's no set policy. The policy is we allow the officer who did the entry, it's his work to let him correct it if he wants to.
Okay. And I think my question was different than that. I'm asking you if this officer, well, I'm going to strike that. The officer who receives the card back, that's a right of theirs to correct it within the policy of the police department?
Yes.
Okay. And the person who oversees that and actually does the entry to check if it's in compliance with state law, like Chad Ellis, he doesn't have the authority to reject it on his own without sending it back to that officer to correct. Is that right?
He does have the authority, yes, to basically hit a button to delete it if it doesn't fit state law. But we ask him not to because we would like, if that individual is a possible gang member, we would like that information, we would like that data in our database.
Okay.
So therefore we give it back to the officer, hey, do you have the criteria here so we can put it in the database? If you don't have it, you don't have it. If you do, you do.
So it's the objective to make sure that of HPD or the City of Houston to try to include a person in the database if they possibly can. Is that correct?
Objection, that misstates the witness's testimony.
It's noted.
The officer went through the time to ask questions on the street. He went through the time to sit down and put him in the database. We want to give him, so he felt it was important enough to put him in, so therefore we want to give him the opportunity to get him in properly.
Okay. So the response to my question is, it is the City of Houston's desire to include a person in the database if they can versus to reject it. Is that correct?
Objection asked and answered.
If that officer who encountered that individual feels that he's a gang member, we don't want to, we're going to try to allow it, you know.
Okay. And so the person that is stopped and placed in, or a gang card is created for them, if it's rejected, where does that gang card go?
If it's rejected and doesn't fit state law, it gets deleted and it's gone.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a problem. It's my fault. I'm trying to imagine this in my mind, how this goes. So the officer on the streets, he's entering this into the computer on the streets, right? This is not a written card that he submits. Is that right?
Correct. It's electronically on the computer, yes.
Okay. And after it's submitted, how is the rejection process? Does it come back to the computer? How does that work if it's rejected?
If we at the gang division reject it,
Yes.
okay, so then what happens is, there's little categories. When it comes to us, it'll be submitted, and then what happens is we'll move it to the open category, and in the open category, then the officer can open it up and make changes and stuff. So if we reject it, we think something's wrong with it, Chad will highlight in red, hey, this doesn't fit state law, here's what you need. He'll move it back to the open category, and the officer will receive an email, hey, take a look at this gang card. So he'll open gang tracker back up, and it'll click on the open category, he'll open the card back up so he can modify it and correct it how he sees fit.
Okay. So Chad will kind of guide them on making it correct so that he can accept it. Is that right?
He'll show them the state law they missed. Like, for example, like I said, you frequent a gang, the criteria is you frequent a known gang area and associate with known gang members. And he'll highlight in red the criteria associate with known gang members because he didn't put gang members in there.
Okay.
So then the officer will get it back, and on that stop, if he has the information, he has the information. If he doesn't, he doesn't. So therefore, he won't get put in there.
Okay.
So we'll just highlight the state law that they omitted from the gang card.
Okay. And if a person is a person notified that they're rejected from the gang entry, that there was an attempt, but it was rejected?
No, at no time is an individual ever notified of being inputted in the tracker system or being taken out or rejected or anything.
Okay. And you stated that the only way that they would know, that a person would know that they were in the database was by their attorney? I'm sorry, let me just back up and ask you, how would a person know that they are in the gang database besides their attorney?
If there was a stop on the street, the officer ran his name, found he was in the database, and the officer told the individual.
Okay.
If, for whatever reason, like they apply for a job or court purposes, their name is ran because your gang entry comes back on the NCIC, TCIC hit return.
Okay.
So therefore, any type of legal proceeding, if his name was run, he'd be notified. He wouldn't be notified, but he would see it. And that's kind of how people find out.
Okay. And you said for a job, what do you mean if they apply for a job?
Well, like most companies you apply for a job and the company will do a criminal history check on you, correct?
Yes.
And so they'll look for felonies and misdemeanors. But what comes back also too is the hit, the NCIC, TCIC hit saying you're a gang member.
Okay. And you said it's an NC.
NCIC, TCIC.
What does that stand for?
I'm gonna take a stab at it. National crime, something, something.
National Crime IC.
NCIC. It's whenever we run individuals. It's like the big federal mandated thing that law enforcement uses, where everybody comes through for criminal records and stuff like that.
Okay. NCIC TC.
TCIC.
IC.
Texas crime, something, something.
Okay. I found it. So it's two acronyms together.
Correct, and that's
Okay.
typically how it all comes. You'll see those two with a hyphen between it, and then the return on the individual, the criminal history check will come and stuff like that.
I got it. Okay. All right. And this also is not available to the public, this database?
No, ma'am, it's not.
All right. So, who are the individuals that are made aware of the entries to the gang database within the City of Houston Police Department?
No one's made aware. I mean, there's no, once someone's entered in the database, he's just put in the database. There's no notification for anybody.
Okay. But we do know at least the officer is made aware that placed him in the database, right?
He knows he put him in the database,
Okay.
correct?
And we also know that Chad Ellis is likely to be aware, correct?
Yes, he read it and authorized it, and so yes, he knows.
Okay. Is there anybody else besides those individuals?
At any time, if anybody ran that individual and saw his name, then they would be aware. But there's no immediate notification, no ma'am.
Okay, and there's no like reporting process, like we've entered this person, let's report it to this higher up or anything like that, is that right?
No ma'am.
Okay. Okay, and how long does a person have to be in the gang database to be considered a gang member?
There's
there a
no,
time frame?
There's no time frame. Once you were put in, you were put in. I mean, once you fit the state law and you're entered into the database, you're in the database.
Okay. So if a person, for example, you have person A who you're entering into the gang database as a self-admitted gang member, and then, but they're with person B, and prior to this contact, neither were in the database. Can B be placed in the database just for being with the self-admitted A?
No, each individual themselves has to fit the state law, the criteria.
But isn't there a criteria that them being with
Correct.
an individual?
Well, that's for individual A. One of like an example I always use, if individual A was stopped in a known gang area and associated with known gang members.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd put their names in there as being with him on that stop that day. But if I wanted to document that one individual, he'd be a separate standalone thing I'm putting in.
Right. So my question is, if you have individual A, and he's not in the gang database, he admits to you, I am a gang member, and you have person B right there with him as he's admitting that, and they're in this gang area.
Mm-hmm.
That's our scene. Does person B automatically, who does not admit to being a gang member, be placed into that database because he is in the area and he is with an admitted gang member?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the criteria. If person B fits another one, then yes, you could put him in.
So being in the area and also being a self-admitted gang member, those two criteria are considered one?
Self-admission is one on its own.
Okay.
And then another one on its own is frequent a documented gang area and associate with known gang members.
Ah, okay. So
So-
you have to frequent the area.
Correct.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. And how would you be aware that the person frequent the area?
Well, clearly, if you stopped in that area, they're in that area.
That's once, okay.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you did some research on the guy and you found maybe he lives there, so clearly he frequents there. Maybe he was arrested there before. Maybe he was listed in offense reports, prior offense reports in that area.
So, so there is some research involved in putting a person into the database, is that right?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes you have everything on the stop itself, and sometimes you may have to do a little research on the computer. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
But most of the time, it's on the stop itself.
okay. And how does the research, is there an encouragement to research an individual to see if they might meet some of the criteria that are not evident, like frequenting the area?
You're not encouraged. It's individual officer. If he wants to do it, he can.
Okay.
I'll elaborate a little bit,
Sure.
if it's okay. Gang work is proactive work. The majority of officers don't do gang cards. It's time-consuming, it's tedious, it's not mandated. The majority of guys do gang cards. We only have a small percentage of guys in the police department doing gang cards. So those guys, they see the benefit of it, they see the benefit of the work, and therefore they do it.
Okay. And you said that there's just a small percentage of of officers that do the gang cards. Is that across the city? What areas are more likely to have those gang cards created?
Well, it's typically your proactive, for lack of a better word, your working officers. We all wear the same uniform. We all have different levels of experience and different levels of stuff we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And within the HPD, you have tons of different divisions. You know, like traditionally, a lot of maybe your traffic enforcement units may not be doing a lot of gang cards. A lot of your storefront officers may not be doing a lot of gang cards. But typically, your gang cards are done by your proactive units, your TAC units, your gang units, your hotspot units.
Okay. And would that be what division has the highest number of gang card entries?
Top of my head, just we do numbers every January 1. We roll over the numbers on the database. So as of right now, our Southeast Division has the most entries from January 1, 2018 till now.
Okay. Okay. And has that always been the case? Has Southeast Division always been the
No,
highest?
it's
One at a time, the Southeast Division.
Always been the highest?
no. It's high right now because there's a lot of shootings and other stuff going on in Southeast Houston right now. We have a lot of our resources over there, so a lot of our proactive units are concentrating their efforts in that area of town. So therefore, the gang card numbers are going to go up.
Okay. And what is the next highest area after Southeast? Would it be Southwest?
It all kind of fluctuates. If I was to guess, it's just strictly a guess, possibly our Southwestern Division or our West Side Division.
Okay. If a person, one of these officers, let me strike that. Are there any awards or accommodations for entering a person into the database, or entering individuals the most into the database?
No, ma'am, there's nothing.
Okay, so there's no type, they don't get any type of reward for taking this extra time, doing this extra work. There's nothing at all.
Correct. That's why we have, there's no reward, there's no incentive. No, ma'am.
Okay, why not?
There's just not. This is just your job. It's what you should do. It's the right thing to do. But there's no incentive, there's no award. No, ma'am.
Okay. So even though it's not mandatory, and these individuals go above and beyond to do it, there's nothing to acknowledge them for doing this job above and beyond. Is that correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Typically, your reward is getting on a proactive unit somewhere, maybe getting on a TAC unit, getting on a gang unit, going to gang division, going to an investigative division like major offenders or something like that.
Would that be a promotion? Or is it?
There's no promotion. The promotion is only within rank,
Okay.
pay and stuff like that, but a different job assignment within the department. The type of police work you do on a daily basis, that's the promotion.
Okay. All right. And have you ever completed any gang cards when you were in the patrol division?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you say that you did a large amount of documentation, or average, or?
I believe I've done a large amount.
Okay. And do you think that helped you become, I guess, a sergeant in this division?
Yes, ma'am.
And just to go back, with the 8 criterias, you don't have to have ever been convicted of a crime in order to be in this database, correct?
Correct.
So you can literally have no criminal background and still be considered a gang member, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and oh, you mentioned that that social media is used for recruiting. Can you tell me how that works, or how you were able to identify that?
Objection, that's outside the scope of the 30B6 deposition request.
You can answer.
No, I'm going to direct them not to answer because it's outside the scope of the 30B6 deposition request.
It's not.
It is outside the scope. There's nothing in the scope of this request about recruiting.
This is what he said. It was one of the 8 criteria is becoming a gang member.
It was recruiting?
You weren't here,
Police
but
department?
absolutely that's what he said. So again,
I think you're
please.
going to have to rephrase your question or specify. more
I'm not going to
completely,
do that.
Because you said recruiting on the internet, and he's not a recruiter for the police department. So if you're talking about
Dennis,
recruiting for a gang,
Dennis,
can you specify that?
Dennis, please. If you weren't here, I think you need to do yourself a favor and get up to date. He gets to answer it, and I don't want to contact the court on this because it would be unnecessary.
All I'm asking for you to do is to clarify your
You don't get to
question.
do that. You don't get to do that. You
said
make your
recruiting.
objection.
I made my objection. You said recruiting.
Your
I'm not
objection-
going to let him answer questions about recruiting for the police department.
Your objection is noted.
That's not what she's talking about.
Okay, so if you're
Because you
clear on
weren't
the
here.
question-
I'm okay.
If you're clear on the question,
Yes.
you can answer it. Sorry.
Yes. So the last criteria is, it says, to document an individual as a gang member, if you use social media for recruiting purposes, then you can document an individual a gang member. And that criteria is mandated by the state legislature. That's how that's been put in there. I personally have no idea how you could use that, because unless you as an individual, your Facebook or Instagram says, hey, come join my gang, therefore you can't use that criteria. That's how I interpret that law.
Slow down, please.
So I've never used that criteria, and when I talk to officers, I've never seen an officer use that criteria.
And that's why I asked. I was curious about how a person would recruit on social media. Thank you for that. Okay. And how are you guys aware of a person visiting a gang member, and that's in custody, right?
Correct.
Okay. How do you become aware of that?
Once again, that's another criteria. We at HPD, I've never used it, and we would rarely use it, but yes, we could. Say you had maybe an investigation involving an individual, and you were deep in the investigation, and maybe you learned that he went and visited somebody, maybe at Harris County Jail. You can contact Harris County Jail, get a records of who visited him that date and who he visited him. It could come up, but it's rarely. I've never used it, and at HPD, the type of work we do, generally, it doesn't get used.
Okay. And when you say associates with other gang members, explain to me what you mean by associates with other gang members. What type of association are we talking about here?
Maybe they've been arrested together before. They're listed in offense reports together because they've been together at a scene. Maybe on social media you see them in pictures together. Okay. Any type of association.
Okay. And is it a one-time association, just like one photograph, one arrest together, or is it? How does that work?
One could be sufficed.
Okay. All right, and explain to me about the gang symbols. You said if a person is aware of gang symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to me how that works? How would you come to that understanding?
So basically, in the course of the conversation with the individual, you're talking about gang stuff, and he has knowledge of what, if I say he's a blood, right? And I say blood's a general term, but he has knowledge of a 5-point star and knows what it means. He has knowledge of a 5-point crown and knows what it means. He has knowledge of the 21 brick pyramid and knows what it means.
Like 20?
21 brick pyramid and knows what it means.
Okay. And how would you become aware of whether they have this knowledge?
Just talking with them.
Okay.
Talking with them. Hey, do you know what this means? Or just in the conversation you have with the individual.
Okay. And are they given any type of warnings, like, be careful, we're having this conversation, it's just a conversation, but this could land you in the gang database?
No, ma'am, nothing's like that.
Okay. All right. And what about the tattoos? What type of tattoos are you looking for? Are you looking for words or also symbols?
It depends on the gang. It depends on the gang. There's words or symbols. There's all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
I mean, specifically with Southwest Cholos,
That's fine, yeah.
what I'm looking for is the number 13,
Okay.
maybe a 5-point crown.
A 5-point crown?
5-point crown.
So like a king's crown?
Yes.
Okay.
A 5-point crown. Pitchforks pointed down.
Okay.
The 3 dots that stands for Mi Vico Loco, My Crazy Life.
So you said 3 dots?
The 3 dots.
Okay.
And typically you'll see it tattooed on the web of the hand or the wrist or maybe under the eye.
Okay.
Maybe possibly a rosary tattoo. And obviously you'll see SWC tattoo.
SWC?
SWC
Okay.
for Southwest Cholos. And then you'll see the 13 with a 1 and a 3 or an X and a 3 for Roman numeral 10 and then
Oh, okay.
3. You'll see it that way. Those are some of the common tattoos you'll see.
Okay. And what about the colors? We kind of talked about that before. How do you know when a person's just wearing a color versus, or how would the officers know when a person's just wearing a color versus, being a gang color?
Well, I mean, you got to kind of look at the whole, like, once again, everything in gang work is you got to look at the big picture. If the individual has just a particular black T-shirt on, well, maybe not, but a black T-shirt with black Dickie shorts with black Nike Cortez, there's probably something there. Everything comes into play. You just can't say, when you say colors, you're looking at everything in the scope of stuff.
Okay. And you said somebody that might be wearing a black T-shirt with black Dickies, and you said what type of shoes? Converse?
Black Nike Cortez.
Nike Cortez. Okay. What does that mean?
Well, if you're a Southwest Cholo, and depending on and you're in a Pacific area town, and if you're wearing those colors in a specific area town, then you're possibly a Southwest Cholo.
Okay.
If you were on the north side of Houston wearing all those colors, you're probably not a Southwest Cholo.
Okay. So if you're a person, say in, I don't want to go too far out, but let's say Greenspoint maybe?
Okay.
And you have this outfit on, you wouldn't be considered a Southwest Cholo, is that right?
Uh,
Automatically?
Automatically, no.
Okay.
You'd have to talk to the individual, hey, where'd you grow up? Where'd you went to high school? Maybe he is from the southwest side of town, and his parents just moved him over there recently. There's all kinds of factors come into play.
What about their race? Does that come into play?
On the individual gang, yes.
Okay. And explain to me, when you're talking about this outfit of the black T-shirt, black Dickies, and the Nike Cortez, what type of individual would you be looking for to be wearing this type of outfit as it relates to their race?
Well, typically Southwest Cholos are Hispanic, so if I saw a young Hispanic male wearing that, I would think possible Southwest Cholos if I'm in Southwest Houston.
Slow down, please.
Sorry.
So if I saw a young Hispanic male wearing that, I would think,
He's possibly a Southwest Cholo.
Okay.
If I saw a young black male wearing that, I think possible BD, Black Disciple. I mean, everything comes into play.
Okay. And would that be if the black young man, the African American young man, if he is in on the same street as the same individual that you indicated would be a Southwest Cholo, would they still be considered what'd you say?
I said BD, Black
Okay.
Disciple. He could be a Southwest Cholo. There are black Southwest Cholos. Like I said, I'd have to talk to the individual, talk to him a little bit. BD's, BD's or his color is black, but typically you won't see BD's wearing all black like I described. That was an example.
Okay. So a person who is wearing black Dickies, are there a certain type of Dickie pants that they would be wearing?
No.
Or just any type?
And there's no specific, I use Dickies as an example because that's a traditional thing we see a lot of the guys wearing on the streets. But the overall factor has to come into play. Just because you're wearing a black Dickies doesn't mean anything, but it does mean something if you take your whole surroundings and everything into play.
Okay. And so we have this individual who has on, say for example, as you stated, a black T-shirt, black pants. Can it be any type of pants?
Yes.
Okay. And then, but the Cortez shoes mean something, is that right?
Cortez are, yes, a traditional Southwest Cholo shoe.
Okay. And if that individual is African American wearing that same outfit in the same area as a Southwest Cholo, including the Cortez shoes, what would you determine that person to be if not a Southwest Cholo?
Probably nothing, just a guy that wears all black, but he could be a BD as well, Black
Okay.
Disciple, like I said before.
Okay. And a person who is, so depending on a person's attire in the area that they're at, that alone can make them be considered suspicious for being a gang member, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other type of shoes that we would look for besides black Cortez?
You see sometimes the house slippers with the paisley. I can't describe them, but they'll have that little
understand.
paisley look that look like the traditional bandana. You'll see that as well too. So if you see a house slipper with that black, for Southwest Cholos is what we're talking about here, that's a possible indicator. So as an officer, if you see something on the streets, that may be just something to cue you, hey, let's go make a conversation with that guy. Or if we're already conversating with him for whatever reason, maybe we'll steer the court conversation towards some gang questions.
Okay. So these house slipper bandana shoes that you described, are they a certain color? Are they black also?
Predominantly black, the little paisley look will be white.
Okay. And the individual who has on all these type of items, clothing items, if they're not in, if you see a Hispanic person, a Latino young man in this outfit in another area, say near, I guess, East Houston, is that a gang area? I don't.
The East End?
Yes.
There's gangs over there, yes ma'am.
Not the East End, East Houston, like Wallaceville.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that area of town.
Okay. Okay, and I guess we'll say Greens Point again. I'm sorry, I don't know that many places around here that
Okay.
well. So you have this individual in Greens Point. Are there any gangs up near Greens Point that a Latino person could be considered a part of because they have this outfit on?
The particular one we're describing here, I can't think of the top of my head, no ma'am.
Okay, so that person may not necessarily, if they're stopped in North Houston near Greens Point, they may not necessarily be entered into a database, correct? As a Southwest Cholo
Correct.
or any other Latino gang?
The officer has to ask the questions, and you got to know the area or town you're in, and know what frequents there, what gangs frequent that area. I mean, everything comes into play. It's just not because you're wearing something or have a particular tattoo.
Okay, so let me ask you this: does the officer have to be versed in the gangs? Meaning, like, kind of what you described, they have to know what gang area they're in or what gang area they're trying to affiliate this person with. Is that correct?
They don't have to, but yes, for lack of a better word, yes.
Okay, so you would want the officers to understand the gangs that they're trying to affiliate a person with when they're entering them into the gang database. Is that right?
Correct, because they don't know. Correct.
Okay, and so how are these officers trained on the type of gangs that are around Houston?
When you as a young officer, you go assigned to a patrol station, you learn about the crime that goes on in that area. That's how you learn, because every place is different. There's training, little training, but there's no set thing like, hey, you're going here, this is what you need to know. But you learn by just being an experienced officer. And
Okay.
that's how it comes.
And then, so basically, the officers really can't enter a person to the database unless they're familiar with the gang, for the most part. Is that right?
That's why when we typically reject gang cards, it's from a young officer who's never done it before or not familiar with what's going on. But once you've worked that area for a little bit, you kind of start learning who frequents what means what, and then it goes from there.
Okay. All right, and I think, okay, so the unreliable witness that we discussed earlier, you said that an unreliable witness can identify a person as a gang member, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me how that would work.
It's unreliable source, and the
Okay.
example I always use is, say you stop two guys in front of a convenience store for a trespass investigation, and you separate them, you're talking to one individual, and he admits to being, say, a 5 Deuce Hoover Crip, right?
Being a
5 Deuce Hoover Crip. And then he tells you, yes, hey, my buddy over there, he's also a 5 Deuce Hoover Crip. Well, then you go talk to his buddy, and his buddy denies any type of gang affiliation. So by state law, we can say, you know, buddy A said buddy B is a 5 Deuce Hoover Crip,
Okay.
an unreliable source.
Got it.
That's typically how we do it.
Okay. And so the fact that the person that you spoke with denies it, you still would enter him into the database, is that correct?
If he fits another criteria.
Okay. And that might be just simply him being in the area.
Being in the area and associating with another gang member.
Okay, the self-admitted gang
Because they
member.
were stopped together, yes ma'am.
Okay. Okay, and what about the corroborating reliable source? Tell me about how that would work in the same context as
Well,
unreliable.
The best example is schools. Schools a big meeting, gathering place for gangs. And so assistant principals, counselors, they'll have great knowledge of gangs. A lot of them do. And so the school administrator tells you this individual's a gang member. That's how we would use it.
Okay. And when you, what makes them a reliable source?
Just their stature in the community as being a principal of the school, being an official at the school.
Okay. Is there a is there a search to see if that reliable source is a gang member in the database?
There's no procedure. We don't generally run that individual, no ma'am.
Okay. And so there's no criminal background check on them either, right?
No ma'am.
Okay. Okay, and are there any white gangs in the database?
Yes.
Okay. And what are those gangs?
Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Circle.
So they're racist
Peck-
gangs,
Pecker,
correct?
yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, Aryan Brotherhood.
Aryan Circle, Peckerwoods.
Okay.
Those are the only ones I know of.
All right. Have you ever entered any individuals from these three gangs in the database?
In my career, I've encountered an Aryan Circle and a Peckerwood, but I entered a gang card on the Aryan Circle guy because on the Peckerwood guy, I didn't have the criteria.
Okay. And what were you missing on that criteria?
I don't recall.
Were you given an opportunity to correct it?
I don't recall. I'm sorry. I never entered one in because I knew I didn't have the criteria.
Okay. So you have entered one in for the Aryan Circle, correct?
I believe I have, yes.
Okay. And what areas do the Aryan Brotherhood frequent?
To my knowledge, we don't have an area in the city where they frequent.
Okay. And what about the Aryan Circle?
And to my knowledge, we don't have an area of the city they frequent.
What about the Peckerwoods?
To my knowledge, we don't have an area of the city they frequent.
Okay. So what about their tattoos? What type of tattoos would you look for in an Aryan Brotherhood?
I don't encounter them a lot. The little bit that I do know, you would see a 1 and a 2, a 1 for the first letter of the alphabet, Aryan, and a 2 for the second letter of the alphabet, B, Brotherhood. You would see possibly a swastika, any type of white supremacist stuff. But that's typically what I know about Aryan Brotherhood.
Okay. So I'm sorry, you said you would see a swastika?
I believe a swastika, you would see the number 1, then number 2.
It would be number 1 and number 2 together?
Yes.
Would it be a 12 or would it be, you know?
Well, you'd see it as a 12, but
Okay.
you read it as a 1 and a 2 for Aryan Brotherhood.
Okay. And what does that mean?
When you talk about gang graffiti, gang tattoos, it coincides with the letters of the alphabet. So the 1 is the first letter of the alphabet, which is A, and the 2,
Okay.
the second letter of the alphabet, is a B.
Okay. Is there anything else besides the swastika and the 1 and 2?
I only know about Aryan Brotherhood from seeing some training classes and stuff on TV. I don't encounter them a lot on the streets.
Okay. Are they a prison gang?
Yes, it started on the prison gang, yes ma'am.
Okay, but they still operate in the streets, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, but you don't have an area for them?
No ma'am.
Okay.
I have very, very limited knowledge on Aryan Brotherhood. I
Okay.
just don't encounter them. In my 20-year police career, I've encountered, like I said, 1, maybe 2 Aryan Brotherhoods.
Okay. And what about Aryan Circle?
The same.
And let me just clarify my question, I'm sorry. Aryan Circle, what type of tattoos would we look for a person in Aryan Circle?
Aryan Circle, to my knowledge, once again, you would see a 1 and a 3. Aryan Circle, 1, 3. You would see a swastika, lightning bolts, and I'm sure there's a lot more, but that's all I know.
Okay. And what about the Peckerwoods? How would you describe their tattoos?
The only tattoo that I know of is they'll have a woodpecker tattoo.
So if you identify a person with just a woodpecker tattoo, you would be able to enter that person into the database?
I'd have to ask them a lot more questions, obviously. Just based on that tattoo alone, no.
Okay. And what type of questions would you need to ask?
If you were, hey, are you a gang member? Where did you get this tattoo? What does this tattoo mean? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to high school? You've been arrested before? You associate with gang members?
Okay. What about colors?
For woodpecker, I believe there's no colors.
Okay. What about Aryan Circle?
I believe there's no colors.
Okay. And what about Aryan Brothers?
I believe there's no colors.
But you don't know that to be the case for certain with all 3 of these, correct?
Correct. In my police career, my contact with those gangs is very, very, very limited.
Okay. And what about recruitment with social media? Have you experienced any recruitment with social media with these particular gangs? When I say these gangs, I mean Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Circle, or Peckerwoods.
I've never, well, I say never. I don't recall ever looking at social media at any of those gangs.
Okay. And what about reliable sources? Have you been able to talk to any reliable sources to determine whether, Are the reliable sources the same for the 3 gangs that you named, along with the Southwest Cholo, like the principal? And
Yes, the state law criteria is the same for all gang members, no matter what race it is.
Right, but there's no state law that says that it has to be, it just says corroborating reliable source, right?
Corroborating identification by a reliable individual, yes.
Okay. And so, but it doesn't tell you who those people are, right?
No, it does not.
Okay, so I guess, just to clarify my question, what I'm saying is, are there any reliable sources or corroborating reliable sources that would be distinguished from the other gangs? Because are these individuals, would they be in school?
Traditionally, no, I wouldn't think so.
Okay, so a principal wouldn't necessarily be that type of individual, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so can you give me a description of the type of individual that would be considered a reliable source for these particular gangs?
It depends on the stop. Say I stopped one of those individuals, say I stopped an Aryan Circle at an apartment complex, that he lives there. I'd ask the apartment manager, hey, do you know this individual? And if she knows me, yes, I know him. He's been here 6 months. He's Aryan Brotherhood. And then she could be considered a reliable source.
Okay. And are there any other white gangs that you're aware of besides just these 3 in Houston?
No, ma'am, that's it. And no, ma'am, that's it.
Okay. And all 3 of these operate in the jail, correct? In the prison?
Yes, my understanding, yes, they're prison gangs, but there is some street activity as well when they get out. That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And is it your understanding that these individuals that participate in these particular 3 gangs, do they start their membership in the prison, or is it something that you don't have to ever have gone to prison to be a part of these gangs?
I can't answer that, ma'am. I have very limited knowledge in those 3 gangs.
Okay.
In my 20-year police career, I deal with gang members inside the city, and those gangs don't frequent the city area, so I don't encounter them.
Okay, so these are not Houston gang members, or gang societies, I guess.
We do not have, say, a group of those particular gangs that operate in different parts of the city. You may have individuals that live inside the city, but the gang, you traditionally see a big grouping of the gang in different little pockets of the city. We do not see that.
Okay. So it's your testimony that there are no white gangs in the city of Houston, correct?
That's not accurate. There's white gangs, like they live in the city, but they're no operator. I can't say, hey, this neighborhood or this apartment complex, we have a large percentage of this type of gang in that area.
But those will be individuals, correct, that you're speaking of?
Correct, but there's not multiple individuals of those gangs living in a particular area that I'm aware of.
So therefore no gangs, correct?
The gang is, they're a gang, the gang is there because they're an individual, but the grouping of them, no.
Okay, I'm sorry, I guess I misunderstood that. So it's your testimony that a person as an individual can be considered a gang if they alone, just as an individual, correct?
No, well, per state law, you have to have at least 3.
Okay.
3 or more individuals to be considered a gang.
Okay. And so I guess I'll go back to ask that, are there any white gangs that you're aware of in the city of Houston?
Objection asked and answered.
To be technical, the answer is yes, but there's no, I can't say this part of the city has this gang or this part of the city has this gang.
Okay. And when you say to be technical, yes, tell me why you say that.
Because there's not an area of town where I can tell you, yes, Aryan Brotherhood frequents this area, or yes, Aryan Circle frequents this area.
Right, I understand. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But I'm sure there's Aryan Brotherhood and Aryan Circle guys living in different little areas.
Okay.
Because I've encountered just a small handful in my career, so I know they live here as an individual, but you can't say that this particular area has a big frequent area of that particular gang.
Right, and so I don't want to be confusing an area with a gang where you're saying there's 3 or more of these individuals that have to constitute a gang. So just to be clear, are you saying that you have never encountered 3 or more individuals together in the city of Houston of these 3 gangs?
No, I have not.
Okay. And so you cannot testify that there are any three or more of these individual gangs to constitute a gang in the city of Houston. Isn't that right?
Well, yes, but we know just from everything that there's more worldwide, countrywide of these gang members. So therefore, there's more than 3 throughout the country. But I do not know of 3 or more in a particular area, a particular apartment complex, particular section of town.
All right. And but you only know of these 3 gangs, correct?
Those are the only white supremacist gangs that I'm aware of.
Okay. And just to be clear, they don't have to be supremacist gangs, just white gangs.
That's the only ones I'm aware of.
Okay. And can you give me the definition of a gang, please?
Okay. A group or association of 3 or more individuals who have a common sign, symbol, name.
Oh. Okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I only have 5 minutes. So.
Okay. A group or association of 3 or more individuals who have a common sign, symbol, name, and identifiable leadership who individually or collectively engage in criminal activity. And that definition is also in the Code of Criminal Procedures, Article 61. Everything we do is in the CCP under Article 61 as far as how we police gangs in the city of Houston and the state of Texas.
Okay. And how is what is the third? I'm sorry. The third thing you named was you said a group of 3 or more, common sign.
Who has a common, who have common signs, symbols.
Okay. And name, correct?
Name.
Okay.
And identifiable leadership.
Okay. And they come together to individually or collectively
Engage in criminal activity.
engage in criminal. Okay. All right. And who is the leader of Southwest Cholos?
Southwest Cholos has no leaders. There's no rank structure within Southwest Cholos.
Okay. And your definition, is that, you said that they have to meet all these criteria for the definition, or is it an or situation? Because
An order situation?
or.
I believe it's an or. Let me think about it. Group association. It's an either or.
Okay. All right, so a group of 3 with common signs,
Symbols,
names,
name, identifiable leadership, who, I believe it is, individually or collectively engage in criminal activity.
Okay. All right, so do you know of the leadership with the Aryan Brotherhood?
No, I do not.
What about the other 2? Aryan Circle?
No, I do not.
Peckerwoods?
No, I do not.
Okay. And so we have the symbol. Is there? How do you identify whether they're engaged in criminal activity if there's no, if there are individuals who are included who may not have a criminal background?
Well, they fit. Okay, rephrase the question. I'm sorry.
So, like, you have a person who has never been arrested for a crime, never had a criminal background, but they have been identified as a gang member, and they're placed in the database. How do you meet the criteria of engage in criminal activity for those type of individuals?
Okay, so that's the definition of a criminal street gang. If you already have an established criminal street gang like Southwest Cholos, because we know that because you have hundreds of members.
Like Southwest Cholos.
Like Southwest Cholos, because we have hundreds of members that are already documented.
Okay.
So therefore, individual alone, if he has no criminal record, but he has all the tattoos and symbols, the gang's already established. And that's to establish a gang. What I just
Okay.
read you was a definition, so that's to establish a gang.
So they kind of latch on to the activity that other members of the gang have done, and they're considered a gang member, although they may not have engaged in crime. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So a person can be a member of the gang, but not have all the criteria of all these other things to be, that's required to be available for the gang. Is that right?
To initially document a gang, you have to have 3 individuals that fit that criteria.
Okay.
So we have 3 established gang members. After that, all we have to have on an individual is 2 of those 8 criteria.
Okay. So how's a gang established? Oh, sorry. We're going to have to break.
Okay.
So we can change it.
This is the end of Media 2. The time is 11:51 a.m. We're off record.